So this is the Unreal Engine Shmup challenge. I'm actually going to share my screen. So you should see this. So yes, the shoot 'em up challenge. This is a challenge where we got a few game developers to send in their projects as if they were applying for a game company, basically. So this is kind of the kind of projects that a game company would probably ask you to do if you were applying there. And we, of course, have some awards for the winners. We have, for this panel, we have selected 3 winners. And we're going to give them some rewards. And also, one of the really good reward is that each winner will have one of these amazing judges going over their project and reviewing it as if it was an actual application to their game company. And it is our kind of idea that hopefully by making this process more public, you can kind of see what's happening behind the scenes, so it's not this hidden thing. And by seeing what we're looking for, you'll be able to realize more what companies are looking for. That's why also we have 3 different ones, so we can kind of see, oh, they're all looking for different things. Yeah, just a quick introduction. So I am Ari Arbirsson. I'm an Unreal Engine evangelist at Epic Games, and I'm going to be moderating this. I'm not going to be actually judging, but I would like to, I love if we could have each judge just briefly give an introduction about themselves. So let's go in order on the picture. So Christian, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christian Kindle. I'm one of the lead programmers over at Slipgate. I work on Graven, and yeah.
Thank you. And Mikko?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mikko Uromo. I'm CTO and co-founder of Red Hill Games based in Helsinki, Finland, working on all kinds of shootery things. Happy to be here.
Yeah, hello, I am Ville Valtiala. I'm CTO and founder of Makia Games, Tampere-based new startup making parkour stuff. And yeah.
Thank you all. So how we're going to set this up is that we have already decided the 3 winners. And how we're going to do it is that we're going to announce each winner one by one. And then each judge will take one winner assigned to them, and they will review the project, play it a little bit, give a little bit of what they think about it, and then review it and give public feedback as if it was, applying at a company. And of course, we're trying to keep it constructive. So you're going to get some positives and some constructive feedback. And thank you so much for the people that sent in, their projects to be the guinea pigs. But I think this definitely will make it so that it will make better applications, better applicants, and it will give great people, great jobs at great companies. I think we should just dive right in. So this is the first award that we're going to be giving out. And that's the most creative. And this is going to be presented by Mikko Uromo. So Mikko, can you please tell us who won the most creative?
Indeed. So the award for the most creative game in the contest goes to Mert Yilmaz. Congratulations. And also apologies if I mispronounce your name. I'm very bad at non-Finnish names. Here you can see a bit of the gameplay. Now, creativity is it's a tricky thing, and it comes in many shapes and sizes. And choosing the winner was difficult, but I could actually, while the video is playing, I could say a few words like, why did I choose, or why was this chosen? So, like I said, like creativity comes in many shapes. You have your gameplay mechanics, gameplay loops, art, audio, everything plays a role. Then there's also one thing that I think is super important. Is like how can you play more with the idea? Like can you expand on it? Can you offer more sort of experiences based on the core idea by adding to it? And in the game, in Mert's game, you can see you don't control, or you can sort of see the video playback is a bit choppy, occasionally fast. You can see that you're controlling 4 characters instead of 1. So that was a unique hook. That was very nice to see. You rarely control more than 1. So it's kind of like a squad of four soldiers, and one of them is the leader, and the leader can pick up power-ups and more guns and so on. And then you can change the leader as well. So you can have, like now you have a sniper on the right, you could change the leader to be someone else and have that guy pick up a different gun and so on. But I mentioned the being able to expand on an idea, and I think here seeing this game that really like made my creative mind or gave it a boost of some sort. So I could immediately start thinking that, okay, well, you could have like a roster of characters, and you could choose that, okay, I'll play with these four heroes or characters, and they could have unique weapons, they could have different skills, different power-ups, you could level them up and so on. So there's a lot to build up on here, which was super nice to see. There's a few things. I guess I could hop onto my screen if this works.
Let's do it.
Let's see if I can push the right buttons. Whoa, that's a lot of windows. So I'm expecting this to be equally choppy. But there were a few things that I would sort of improve myself. First of all, like the hit reactions. So this is the constructive part. Hit reactions, for example, like I'm hitting the enemies, but they don't really make, like I can't see any VFX popping up or anything like that. Of course, when they die, that's very apparent. Then this is me throwing a grenade. Oops, me trying to survive. Sorry, I was supposed to throw a grenade. Like that. The mechanics for moving the grenade, I would personally like you move around with WASD as you do in any kind of a shooter, and you change the aiming with the mouse. But when you throw a grenade, you move the grenade trajectory with the keys instead of mouse, which feels off because now you're still aiming, but you're kind of like switching controls. So for me, that felt a bit off. And then of course a few things like having a start screen would be nice, so that you don't go immediately into the action and so on. Oh, and yeah, my personal pet peeve, when you press ESC whenever, it quits, and that's kind of frustrating at times, but it is fine. Then onto the code review. So I wanted to say a few words about code reviews in general. So the way I see code reviews, like we do code reviews at Red Hill all the time for pretty much every single submit. Usually it's like the system owner who reviews, but very often it's also a peer. So let's say mid-level programmer is reviewing mid-level programmer's submit. And code reviews are super useful in like, of course, like you may have made false assumptions, like you go in with the best of intentions, I'm going to fix this or do this way, this is how the system seems to work, and then someone else points out that no, that's definitely not the way to do it. So you learn something. It could also be that the system owner or whomever is reviewing goes like, oh, I didn't know this was possible, so now I learned something. But most often what happens is that you become blind to your own mistakes, right? You work on something for a few days, for example, and you sort of start losing sight, and then someone else points out that, oh, you're actually missing this thing there, like you're not checking if this thing actually exists, so if another player connects or disconnects, the game will crash and so on. So stuff like that is super useful. And then one thing to take into account is that reviewers make mistakes as well. So again, reviewers may not know every single thing about every single thing. So they are humans too. So anyway, here in Visual Studio you can see all of the code. There's blueprints on top of this as well, but I'll focus primarily on the code. So if I think about the whole package and just like some general pointers first. Overall, the code was super clean and easy to read and follow. So thumbs up for that. It was very like if I needed to figure out how something works, it's like, okay, sniper, boom, that's there, or actually here. So it was very easy to follow. Overall, the coding style was fairly consistent. I would argue it's actually much more consistent than what Epic has in the Unreal code base. But so also thumbs up for that, because it's distracting if this function is in one style and then this function is in another style. It just makes it harder to follow. In a few spots, Mert was using this pragma region. So, for example, here, just sort of syntactic sugar, so you can group stuff into one region. Like all the movement functions live here. So this makes it again very nice. And of course, you could use more of these. There's only 3 of them, but you don't often actually see this, so that's very nice. One key thing in Unreal is delegates, and they were used quite extensively on all sorts of things like running out of ammo, weapon posts or broadcasts to all the listeners that, hey, I'm now out of ammo, and so on. Super nice to see that concept understood and used well. Then const correctness, so using const as not the plugin. So for example here, just as having constants as input parameters, meaning that there's no way for the code here to change the amount value. It's a const going in, and the function will just read it. One way to make things a bit less error prone. Then extensibility. So you can see here that there's a base class for weapons, and then there's a sniper. There's different kinds of pickups, etc. So it's easy to see that this could be extended, which is super nice. Just sort of a pro tip. I have this rule of thumb that don't sort of start super general purpose from the get-go, because most likely you will make false assumptions. Like you try to build the best system there is for weapons or something, and then what you end up doing is kind of like fighting the system, fighting those false assumptions you had early on. Whereas like you do one weapon, you do another weapon, you do a third weapon, then you notice that, okay, these all actually share a lot of functionality, so I can just sort of group them into some kind of a base class. But in terms of this exercise and this code base, I can easily see how to expand on it and how to extend functionality. So very nice. Yeah, I'm not going to go super deep into the blueprints, but overall they seemed fairly sane and mostly like let's say data only. So just setting properties, and like this blueprint will use that mesh and so on. So that was very nice. Then a few generic sort of not so good things. One is naming conventions. So Unreal has this like out of the box they and also internally in the engine, they split, like the headers go into public and implementation CPP files go into private folders. This code base has both, and that's never nice for anyone sort of reviewing or trying to use a code base, because you don't immediately know where to look for something. So basically, pick one. Like I don't personally like the private public split myself, and we don't use that internally. But if a studio does use it, then stick to that. But don't mix and match. Then also naming conventions. Like some of the classes have my, some have my shoot 'em up, some have nothing. So again, pick one convention and stick to it. It just makes things easier. Then what else did I have? Sort of generic things. So just sort of, because I don't want to go through every single file and point out the same thing over and over again. So if we go to my pawn, there were a few spots where there was a pattern like this. So you have something, some object, and you get something from it, and then you get something from that. Well, what if this is null, or what if that is null? More importantly, what if the child actor is null? I believe this is actually one place where the game crashes, because it doesn't take into account that this can be null and not exist. Then basic stuff like forward declares. Yeah, this one didn't have any, but it's, oh sorry, this is the wrong file. But a few of these header files didn't do the forward declares. Like for example, you could have this here instead of that. Obviously, both are in this case totally valid, but just makes it nice and clean, and you don't have to, like if you make a non-Unity build, then you don't need to have a bunch of includes for each header file, just to be able to declare that, hey, I want to use a camera component here, or this function will return a camera component. Then forgot to make a note of where this was, for example, but there were a few cases. I'm just going to use this as an example. So there were a few cases where the code reads roughly like this: if foo do something. And just a personal recommendation: always use curly braces, even if it's a single line. A number of times there's been a bug where, like, you know, something like this, like you expect this to exit or something, or do something, and then another function is called because it's not part of the same scope. I've lost track, so highly recommend using curly braces, even if it's a one line thing. Then just in terms of like overall code cleanliness, if you will, if you have a virtual function that doesn't actually do anything, all it does is cost super. Just get rid of it. Like you can add it back in if you actually need to override functionality, but no need to have those sort of polluting the code base, because it's also like visual noise for anyone else looking at the code. Then yeah, there were plenty of magic strings. Like if I take this, well, for example, this one. So of course the code knows exactly where this is, or which socket to use, and so on. I just prefer to declare these in one spot as some kind of constants, and then use the variable name. So very often you need to have these strings in more than one place. So I just prefer to define them as constants. Then of course, one thing that could be improved. Where was it? Where was the character? Was it here? Yes. So no, actually, sorry, I'm mistaken. I made a bad note here. But the point I was trying to make, that pretty sure there were some spots where some properties were, for example, not declared as U property, but then there was a blueprint implementing those. So basically, if it's something that a designer could go in and just tweak with the values and iterate and try to make things even more fun, try to expose those to blueprints so they can have their field day in the editor. Then the documentation was actually lacking quite a bit. So there's sort of the baked in stuff, but then if you scroll, like, yes, tick is called every frame, but there really isn't much documentation at all, and that's always like obviously if it's something super obvious, like well, duh, tick is called every frame, that's the whole point of it. But let's say your function does a lot of things, like you could, for example, say this chunk is doing blah blah blah. Again, makes things easier for other people. Don't need to document every single thing, but more like this chunk is responsible of thing X. That is nice. And then notice that logging wasn't used much at all. So I think there were like, yeah, precisely 2 instances of UE log used. And I couldn't find anything else using UE log. And of course, like, debuggers tell you exactly what's happening, but logs are super nice in showing, like, okay, well, what led to this, right? So you can see, like, okay, this character health was 80, 60, 40, 20, minus 400, whatever, and he's still running. So you can sort of backtrack and see what happened. Then individual files, a few of them I wanted to point out. So the health component, oh, actually, we were there. The health component, so this doesn't seem to do much more than just track health, but actually Unreal Actors have a damage system that's built in and supports different damage types. So might as well use that. I don't think this does anything that system doesn't do already. Of course, documentation of this damage system is not the best, so not a lot of people necessarily know that it's out there, but just a suggestion. Those I mentioned. Then in my pawn, right, so basically the thing that has the four characters, this was using child actors. From personal experience, child actor components are quite flaky, and in our game we had issues with them. We tried to use them for weapons, like you combine weapons out of multiple child actor components, and the Epic engineers also suggested that maybe don't. And in fact, there's not really that much difference. Like, you can just spawn an actor and attach other actors to it works just the same. So I would steer clear of child actor components myself. Mind you, this was like 3 years ago, so I can't remember exactly what the issues were, but there were many issues. I can say that. Then, yeah, right. I think I mentioned this already. Yes. So if you in certain cases in the game you right-click and it swaps the leader. In certain cases the tracking goes wrong and the child actor is no longer there, and then the game crashes. So always have sort of safeguards around stuff like this. Then there was the grenade trajectory somewhere here. This is using debug draw. So obviously for the sake of this exercise, that's fine, but for anything that's supposed to ship, this won't work. These get stripped out in shipping code unless you explicitly force them, but you really don't want to. So these should be implemented properly. Then game mode. Where did we have the game mode? I'm being blind. There. So this is, I'll just split that onto its own line. So this is, I believe, from Epic's example, and they use hard-coded paths. The problem with this is that you have a designer or an artist who means well, and they organize your asset hierarchy, and this is suddenly in a different spot. This will just crash, and it will crash the editor, and then everyone will have a bad day. So instead, what I would recommend you do is set this as like you just use a property that you can specify in the game mode that, okay, we will use this thing, and then sort of spawn that. I think the old shooter game examples, for example, also had a hard-coded paths. Where was it?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Oh, well, actually, I'm almost done. So should be good. Oh yeah, the general purpose code. Why can't I? Sorry, I can't read today. So you have grenade base and you have grenade. There's not much happening here. Like I would even question if you, because to my knowledge, there's only one type of grenade. So having this sort of base class thing might not even make sense until you actually have different kinds of grenades. But then also you could think of moving part of the logic, if memory serves me right. Yeah, grenade base doesn't do much more than just play sound, but then grenade does a whole lot more. And I would actually sort of expect that the base sort of behaves always the same, that, hey, these are the actors that are impacted. And then, you know, the explode function that you can override will just know that, okay, I can deal damage to these guys. What else? Yeah, there were small things here and there, but really not worth calling out.
Well, we're out of time.
I think that's actually it.
Do you wanna summarize it?
Job well done. I mean, overall, goes back to the beginning. Code was easy to read and follow, and could be extended. Ticks all the marks for me. So job well done.
Thank you so much, Mikko. I also want to say that for the people who have these prizes and are having their code reviewed, it can sometimes be a bit demoralizing hearing your code reviewed and hearing about all these oh, this could be better, this could be better. But just take into account that the more nitpicky it sounds, the better your code was to begin with. So yeah, good job. I guess I can then go to the next project. I had some notes, but we'll get into it if we have more time after all of them. So let's just continue to the next one. So we have the award for the best technical execution, and that's going to be presented by Ville Valtiala, CTO at Makia Games.
Yeah, so to the next game. For the best technical, we ended up with Jan Paraska, Busy Chef. Yeah, here we have gameplay. So there is this chef and busy lunch hour, and you have like 3 different food carts. Like 2 of them are shoot different foods, and third is like steam oven that steams vegetables. And there's several enemy types. There is few of these angry customers that throw stuff. Then there's guys that chase you, and then there is this boss of angry couple that comes throwing chairs at you. So it works pretty smooth. Didn't see any crashes, and yeah, it plays well. Controls, everything seems to work. But of course, for the technical nomination, the bigger part of it was the actual project and the code. And yeah, here we will go actually quite a lot of same things than Mikko found out previously. And yeah, it was pretty hard to pick the best because several of them had like similar goods and bads. But yeah, I'll share my screen. So yeah, here we have the project, and here we have the code. So in general, the code base seems pretty clean. There is like same kind of architecture that there's base classes in C++, and then the specializations in blueprints. In general, pretty readable. I like the architecture. So to go more specific things, start with the characters. So the characters have this design where the character itself is pretty simple, and same manner than in the previous game, there is health system as its own component. There's also own components for handling weapons. And an interesting detail in this project was the actor pooling thing, which is pretty popular optimization stuff. And here is a custom implementation of that I found it pretty nice because it is not intrusive. It works. It has same defaults, and it can be added to all kinds of actors and used by the spawners. I haven't done any benchmarking to see if this is necessary in this kind of project, but well, as a competition project, yeah, it's interesting detail here. Then Going to the player controller. Yeah, the player controller itself is blueprint only, and it is very rather basic thing. It sets up things as soon as I find the blueprints in general are pretty clean. They have well used the nodes. They are very readable throughout the project. So player controller just sets stuff and passes inputs for the character. In the same manner than in previous project, this project also uses regions, which make it easier to read and fold in editor. In cell, view properties are used properly throughout the project, which is also a good thing to note. And occasionally there, I don't remember if it was in this particular, yeah, there is empty ticks, so yeah, that was also mentioned previously, so those could be cleaned because they are easy to add back. The player character itself is rather simple design. It also does basically setup and handles controls, and all the functionality is then passed to the components, for example, the weapon component. So the weapon system is pretty modular. There is this base weapon class, and there can be like any number of those added to the weapon component, then manages the shooting and swapping between those. And here the design is pretty clean. It's actually pretty nicely commented too. It exposes the proper stuff to blueprints, and passes the actual firing, null checks and whatnot to the actual weapon. So going to the weapon, it is also like, yeah, the standards stay throughout the code base. It doesn't have I didn't find any of the like naming stuff that the previous one had. Yeah, the weapon class is pretty extensive. It has like good base for all kinds of weapon types. There ain't that many in this, but yeah, it is very extendable. Back to the character side. So to the enemies. The enemies C++ side is very simple, and the activity is actually driven by AI controller and blackboards and behavior trees. It's also, in my opinion, pretty good design. Yeah, of course, simple project, so it's simple tree, but it's also rather clear and readable, easy to see what happens. I'm not expert on AI, so I'm not diving deeper into that. But yeah, on the code side, the AI characters, they have the setup and the pooling logic, or calling the pooling upon that. Checking if the pooling is there, so no crashes there either. Other game elements, there is the pickups. Pickups also use the pooling logic. They are pretty simple stuff too, but clear and readable. So they also have the extraneous tick function. But other than that, they set up the collision, set up the collision handling, and then pass all the further activity to the base, child classes. So that is good. Yeah, let's check the spawners. Spawners are the things that spawns those things and have the pooling stuff in the form of the return spawned actor. It is pretty clean logic too. It's also exposed to blueprints, so blueprints can use that. Pretty basic pooling logic. Check if we have pooled stuff and use those, or otherwise, yeah. Yeah, then could check some of the blueprint side. In blueprint side, from the AI character, there is 2 specializations, melee and ranged character, that they have some simple setup logic related to the weapon handling, and then the actual enemy types are further specialized from those 2 blueprints. Then they have their configurations for attack ranges and stuff like that, while the weapons handle the damage side. Similar manner, the character weapons are split into ballistic weapon and trade thrower, sideboard, and then the actual character weapons are further specialization of those, with also just data only blueprints. So yeah, it's like I like this kind of architecture that base class has the functionality and then blueprints can do smaller specialization, and then the actual variants are just like data only things. And in similar manner, the projectiles too there is also types for those. There's ballistics and straight line projectiles. Have some differences on how they do damage, and basically just overriding the projectile hit event, and then the actual projectiles are just data only variants of those. So yeah. Then to the UI side, UI2 has base classes in C++. Rather simple stuff there with the necessary parts using bind widget. So you can't miss those. And going to the UI blueprints, I like that the main UI is composed properly, so it's not all in one single blueprint, but instead like different components are further blueprints, like health bar, the weapon panel, and the weapon panel further is a panel that has nested weapon blueprints. So yeah, well composed UI. So not putting everything on same. So one thing to mention about the UIs though, I saw there was stuff using, for example, in weapon widget, native tick and updating things there, but Unreal also has this thing called bindings, so you can just, instead of running things on tick, actually bind the parameters directly in the widget itself to make it more local to the actual parameter and not to the whole class. For example, the weapons ammo, because these blueprints already have the relevant data brought in, so binding wouldn't add any more complexity on that side.
I know that data binding has been a bit hot topic with how Unreal does it. Do the other panelists have any opinions about using data binding in Unreal UI?
I don't use it. So
Can you explain why?
yeah, as far as I'm aware, it kind of just runs on tick and just checks. So I mean, if it's already running on tick, binding would make sense if that's all it's doing. You're not gaining or losing anything in that case, but usually I like to go with like event-based UI updates and event-based in general.
How about
Yeah,
Mikko?
that is a good point.
Well, just in any case, I just wanted to show people that there are different opinions about it, because binding in UI in Unreal has been a bit of a hot topic, because yes, it does make the code more readable, but there have been some opposition to it because, like what Christian said, is that it does check every frame if the data has changed.
Yeah.
So we are creating a new version. Yeah, like of course, like don't prematurely optimize unless it's actually hitting your frame times. So in that case, it will be easier. And also, we are working on a better system called MVVM, Model View V Model, which should offer a data binding way of doing it. It's not ready yet. So just for the people watching, there are pros and cons against it, and no like silver bullet. Please continue.
Yeah, that's good point. That it is not the only way, but I was mostly pointing it out on the things where there is tick function made to do the updating.
Yeah, then it might just as well use bind.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't change event-based updating with binding, at least for time being.
Exactly. I don't think anyone would.
Yeah. Yeah, I have gone through the main elements. Oh yeah, wave manager, how the game handles the waves. It's also clean, nice logic with using blueprint editable wave configurations. So it's easier for a game designer to change those. It has the spawners. And yeah, it is also blueprint callable, so game mode can operate it, and it doesn't run itself, but the actual game mode can do that. The game mode itself is data only and implemented in C++. And yeah, it handles the setting the wave manager. It has this state management for managing pausing, game over, game states. There is pretty simple state management, but it works well and it's very readable. And not much more to see there. That and the wave manager run nicely together. I think I'm gone pretty much through the code base.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We still
So,
have
yeah.
10 minutes, so I thought we would just maybe like go through some of the notes I have, and then we could
Yeah.
open the stage for all the panelists to comment on it. But first, before I start, going through my notes, I would like to ask if the other judges have anything that stood out to them that we would like to comment on for this project.
Yeah, I have a few things. So in a few different projects, you see kind of the waves and all that all kind of interconnected with stuff. And this particular project is a much different approach where it's kind of isolated everything into its own little manager class. And if you think about, like, for me, a wave system or a horde system or something like that works way better if you can kind of isolate it to its own components, pass in data assets only, kind of spawn things. And this definitely was pushing in that direction, which was something I really liked. I like to see the separation of the system.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. One thing also to
Yeah.
make it more extendable would be to have it so that each wave is, instead of being a data asset, be a full blueprint. So they could do really dynamic stuff, like basically allowing the game designers full control over each wave. But that's, of course, not every game team will want to give them that much control over it. Sometimes the tech or systems programmers will want to keep it so that you can only change a few variables instead of giving them full blueprint access. And it depends on the project, honestly, and the team.
Programmers know best, so
Yeah.
Damn straight. I could also just add to the data binding UI thing that was discussed earlier, just from personal experience, because the bindings, like Christian said, they run on tick, but a UI designer might not understand this. So this is something that happened on our game quite a few times, where you play the latest build and go like, well, why is this so slow? And then you profile and go like, oh, because someone added that the health bar thingy or whatever now has this function that it's calling all sorts of things from the game mode or whatever. Yeah, the designers, they mean
I'm
well,
so
but
glad.
they may not may not understand what they're doing.
I'm also so glad that you mentioned profiling, because that is the best way to figure out whether something is slow or not and whether you should optimize it or not. Speaking of optimizations, I noticed that this project included pooling, and I would love to hear opinions from the other judges on that.
Pooling is great.
Yes. So I guess I'm in a little bit of a different boat. I mean, of course, pooling is great. I think it's very contextual to the situation. I mean, if you don't need pooling, it adds kind of additional layer of complexity. Once again, that profiling comes into play, and you can, if that's your issue, that's awesome. Pooling comes in, saves the day, everyone's happy. But I do worry sometimes about, especially in a smaller project like this, if the pooling complexity that adds in the code is worth any type of performance you may gain. So I think it's kind of situational, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. But like, let's say this game had 100 customers coming at you at all times, and they sort of pop in and out of existence as you throw whatever it is it that you throw at them. Then something like pooling might actually be a very, very good thing to have. But yeah, it's totally depends on the use case.
Yeah.
There was actually one question. Sorry, go on.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just because one thing I remembered way too late, and like 15 minutes before this started, was to check the blueprint sizes, and because that's something that can bite you in the ass when it's too late. So basically, if you have a blueprint that references another blueprint, then basically, in a nutshell, that blueprint is included in this blueprint. So if you check the size map of a blueprint asset, you may often be surprised. For example, our character at some point was 2 gigs, which was a bit heavy. because someone had added blueprints that added blueprints that had more blueprints. So I don't know if Ville, for example, if you looked at the size map in this one, because I didn't have time to check that game.
They didn't have time to do much profiling, so checking that stuff. So
It's a really
no
good
idea.
thing that you called this out, though, because yes, reference hell or reference dependencies is probably the number one or most common issue any project will run into as it starts growing. It will happen to any team growing from indie to AA to AAA. And if this isn't nipped in the bud really early on, you can see like AAA studios having enormous times trying to even just start the editor when the game is ready, like trying to load into levels. And also it takes a lot of memory. So really glad you mentioned it. Also, Christian, you mentioned about pooling maybe not being necessary. I would say that's a really good point also. Maybe in this case, it might have been just so the interviewee would be able to show off, hey, look, I know how to make the systems. But I would argue myself, when you're making a game, you're making it, you're trying to get as many features in, and then you have to ship it, and you didn't have time. So I would call, in this case, maybe this would have been a premature optimization. You might have been trying to solve a problem before it was a problem. And imagine, instead of creating the pooling system, how neat features you might have been able to put into the game instead with the same time. Of course, again, it might have been a conscious decision just to show off that, hey, I know the concept of pooling and I know how I could do pooling in Unreal. But for anyone watching this, only implement pooling if you notice in the profiler that object destruction and instantiation is the problem for your game. Because usually I would bet there are 10 other problems you should solve first. And if not, there are 10 other features waiting to be implemented for the same time that you took to make that.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully if you have like a code interview or something like that, you have some type of guidelines, or maybe even they'll be nice enough to give you some type of working template. And hopefully within those guidelines, they mention something about profiling performance or some type of goal that they're looking for as well. So something with pooling might really make sense, or maybe they're just looking for fun.
We still have 2 minutes. Is there anything any of you want to bring up about this project? Anything that stood out? If not, while you think of stuff, I can mention that I noticed in some of the code files they include paths. So Ville, if you could bring up some of the code and scroll up to the include paths, they'll some other class, maybe the character, for example, and you'll notice that some of them, have those ... comma. And I'm hoping this was made by the tool automatically, like by ReSharper or Visual Studio or something like that. But usually in Unreal, we always go with the path starting from the private or public folder, like after that. So in this case, it would just be types. So having ... / is not needed. We still have 1 minute, so I'll also comment on regions. Yes, you can use them, of course. We don't use them much for within Epic ourselves. But like I said, it doesn't detract. It's just not common. I don't usually see them in Unreal Engine projects because we usually don't have things in the way enough that it would warrant regions. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't use them. Just pointing out, you shouldn't feel like you have to use them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like in this case where you have forward declarations, you probably don't need to use a region for that. But if you have, 600 lines of functions that are just for shooting a gun, which probably don't need that, but that would be a great spot in my opinion to put like slap a region in there.
Yeah.
For specific functionality. I did have one more thing that I saw. And it was about how the weapons. I'm a big fan of just putting isolated systems into their own parts. So I did notice that with like the weapon component, it pull trigger, release trigger is happening in the component from what I remember, and it's calling on the weapon.
Here.
Yeah, I would usually like offload that to the weapon and let that handle it completely. Maybe just relay or reroute the input to the weapon from the character. But yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we're out of time for this one. Ville, do
Yeah.
you want to summarize it for us?
Yeah, in general, yeah, good points here, but yeah, in general, it was quite clean and quite nice project. Used well both C++ and making the specializations in blueprints. Very readable, easy to figure out where things are when after opening the project. So
Fantastic, great to hear.
good job.
If you'll stop sharing your screen, and then let's
Yes.
take it to the last one. So this is the last project that we're going to code review, and that is the best overall concept award also. So Christian Kendall, can you please take it away? Who won the best overall concept?
Yes, the best overall concept was, I apologize ahead of time, Pugnak by Ugur Tunç. And yeah, I actually have some gameplay I've recorded myself here that hopefully will be nice and smooth. We will see.
I'll let you take over then.
Let's see. See if it's nice and smooth. Yeah. Here we
It
go.
is very smooth.
Mm-hmm. So the overall concept was it was pretty interesting. It's something much different than I've seen. Essentially, you have to collect insulin, manage your blood glucose levels in order to stay alive. You have your health, and if you want to get into the sweet spot and kind of manage that left and right, and you can see the bar up top. So what I really liked about this game was just how responsive it was. The impact effects and the impact sounds all just feel great. Now there's multiple weapons. You have the zooming when you're running. It's very nice. It also has menus. It has a nice mood. It's really satisfying when some of these enemies are running right at you and you just shotgun them down and they just topple over. So overall, it felt very well together, and it felt like a fun game to play. Which when I play games, that's usually my go-to thing for how much I like it. So I think we're almost done. Yeah, I'm gonna let this play out. Obviously, as a really good gamer, it's hard for me to die in these games, so I had to let myself. So, all right, now let's get into the code review side of things. Okay, so just to jump right into it here. So overall, you can see kind of the project structure here. I'm going to repeat a lot of things that other people have said already. So you have the private and public, which in our internal projects we don't particularly use, but that's fine as long as it's consistent across the board. So kind of the core of this game is the horde system or the wave system. So we'll go ahead and hop in there first, which should be right. Oops. Right here. All right, we're gonna be really zoomed in. So the first thing I kind of saw when I was looking at this was you have like hard-coded values, which is fine for some type of game jam game or game that you're maybe putting together. But in an interview process, I would definitely like to see something that's more exposed so I can tweak the settings, see how things might interact in different, when it's not planned, things you may have not accounted for. So usually I would like to see things that are less hard coded. Miko said it earlier, is things that are magic numbers or magic, words. I like that a lot better than hard coded. So, and also in here we have like wave count. Maybe instead of something like wave count, you could go with like a token pool, right? So you create these enemies and then they have an associated value. You can create squads, things like that. So you can kind of manage the system on its own without having an explicit that's wave count, number of enemies. There we go. So yeah, just like more of a token pool, something along those lines. But overall, how this is kind of going, I like that the game mode is managing the actual game mode. It's not being something in the player necessarily. So that's something that's nice. Like I've kind of repeated before, like the isolation of systems. So we'll just go down the list here real quick. So you can see in here, there's a bunch of just kind of manual work. That's a bunch of adding these individual classes over into the UI. Ideally, to me, I would like to get most of the HUD compiled into just one UMG widget. I don't know how the rest of the panelists feel about that, but I like most things that are going to be in the HUD, at least on-screen HUD, should probably be in a single UMG widget, and then you can go down that list within it. So essentially take these smaller widgets and then just combine them to one larger widget inside of something outside of just the HUD. But that kind of covers the HUD. I mean, there's a lot of little nitpicky things. So one big thing I do want to kind of talk about is using the built-in Unreal functions. Like for example, you have on possess, and then on possess, you're spawning a default weapon. Well, inside of like a character, we have like a restart function, and functions like this that you can use, even possessed by. So you can know exactly when things are happening in order to initialize these values, such as spawn default weapon. Same with setting the HUD. So that would also work for something like restarting. You kind of offload the health to the character itself rather than it being in the player controller. I don't know if any panelists have any preferences on like initialization process or anything like that. Anyone can jump in whenever if they would like. So let me look through my list. Next, we are going to go to the framework and then characters. So in here, we have some die logic. So you can see we create a die or a dead screen. Ideally, I would like to see this offloaded to maybe somewhere else, unless this create dead screen is strictly for the player themselves, like a countdown to respawn, something like that. Once again, this is kind of nitpicky. When I make things, I like to imagine it in like a multiplayer environment in order to isolate things as best as I can. Making a game that would...
Yeah, so how would you make this better? Like having the base character like calling the dead screen like directly, maybe not the most optimal choice. So what should the dead character do instead? The base character, I mean.
So base character, if it's playable, I mean, it's always like a decision of what the responsible, I'm gonna call it actor, should be. The responsible object. Like in a multiplayer game, you would have create dead screen. It might send to the UI or create a new widget. It's like, hey, countdown. But a game over screen, I would imagine, would be managed by the game mode. It would essentially send out a message or something, create a widget, something like that.
So either by, for example, having a delegate or just calling the game mode directly.
Yeah, exactly. So looking through here, there is a... We'll have to check real quick. The buff component and then get health. Yeah. So we already have this like health managing system in here. Let me see if I can find, either on the character or in here. You could have some type of delegate that would, on death, the game mode could hook up to it and listen for whenever that happens and then do the appropriate logic based on it. It's the same thing with counting, I think. Let me see if I have the note for that. Increase. But keeping track of kills, you wouldn't want to necessarily have the AI on death update that themselves. If you already have like an overarching manager that's spawning these things, they should already know when something dies. So there's a lot of way to offload the logic from these characters to a higher system. And the character doesn't really need to know about them, and it can just kind of be completely separated. So that is definitely a part of it. And another thing, while I'm here, see if I can, oops. We have the max health and base character. And then if we go to our AI character, which I lost, you also have health. So maybe like in this scenario, it would be a good idea to make a shared component or even a shared struct or something where you don't have to redefine these. I'm a big fan of kind of components. So yeah, I do also see this right here, which is this receive damage function. So this is the only place it's being used. We use this on take any damage. And what we can actually do is if we go to, we're gonna do this the hard way. Just gonna follow it down. In here, in the base actor class, we have a take damage function already built into Unreal. And so we can use that in any character, a base shared class, which if you look, we have base AI, a character. So what that means is that our player character and our AI characters, their closest class is the character built into Unreal, a character. So there's a lot of logic here that we could actually put into a base class and share, which is depends on what it is, but usually that's a good call to do. Depends on if you want to override certain functionality or what the actual object is. But overall, like just a few tweaks to this could really just clean things up and really solidify what it is. Because like I said, the game feels really responsive and really fun already. So in order to make the characters more extensible, these small changes like that would go a long way.
This is now the second time Ajaz has mentioned about using the already built-in functions like take damage. And I think this is a great point to bring up to anyone making games on Unreal, is that Unreal is not just a rendering engine, it is a game creation engine. It has the built-in gameplay framework. All of these wheels that have already been made to make other games that you should definitely take advantage of, so that you're not constantly finding yourself reinventing the wheel, or even worse, going against the Unreal way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Unreal has so much good functionality just right beneath the surface. It's well worth spending the time to just go look through the classes and just see what's already existing there. Because chances are what's already there is going to work with the engine better than something that you're placing on top of it and essentially building over. And it also speeds up workflow tremendously. Unreal Engine is fantastic and it has so much functionality just built into it that it's a shame not to use what's already there. Like replication in general makes life so much easier in Unreal. So there's a few other things I'd like to go over, and we'll go over to some of the components. So the buff component that we were in earlier. So we have our tick component, which obviously if you're going through and your glucose is going up and down, you have to calculate that route. That kind of makes sense with tick. That's not a big deal. There are other ways of managing these types of things, and that's like you can use a timer potentially. Timers should be obeying time dilation and if the world is paused or not. So if you find yourself constantly checking like set timer, it might be a good idea, or not set timer, but is the world paused or something like that. Timers should obey the world's state. Does everyone else feel pretty good about timers here? Are they a fan, or are they like tick only?
We use timers quite a lot. Obviously, depends on what you need to do. But if for example, like I just need to, I don't know, 10 seconds from now something needs to happen, then I usually just set a timer. obviously then expose the 10 seconds to the designers in blueprints. But yeah, just like if you start tracking things and tick, then you have a whole lot of this thing started at timestamp X variables. You end up with a whole lot of those. So I don't know. Timers are quite lightweight after all. So
yeah, and actually that was a really good point that you brought up with the basically code structure. Like if you are checking for a lot of timers, it does kind of clutter your tick function. So also consider timers not just for like the perceived performance impact, but also just for cleaner code. Like it's just so clear when you're making a timer, like, hey, this 10 seconds, and then when it's done, call this function.
Yeah, we also use mostly timers because they make both the intent clear, and it's also like FPS fluctuations don't break things, or if server and client are running on like if client is running slower than server, it doesn't break things. I think timers in most cases are a lot nicer than ticks.
Really good point about the intent also, because you don't want to like to stop using tick functions. There's a right function for the right job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And most things should always be taken with like, it's very situational. Because of course there's never, I mean, of course I always have the right answers, but there's never a right answer except for mine. No, yeah, there's always it's all situational. Like I was helping someone the other day and I said, well, it depends. And they're like, oh, of course it depends. That's a great response. No, but it really does. But a lot of situations, yeah, timers will work out quite well. A lot of times what I like to do though is if I'm creating, a new class or something and it's not based off of a child class already, is to make sure to disable tick just from the get-go. It's a, let me see if I can find a, yeah, so can never tick, false. You can see right here, don't need tick for weapons. And so just by disabling it, you just remove those completely from any type of execution call. You don't have to worry about that. Because even calling a tick that never has any logic in it does have a cost to it. So by just disabling it, you can, I wouldn't necessarily say gain performance back, but not miss any that should be there.
there's a project setting, isn't there? Like creating any new blueprints, make them not tick by default. Use that.
Yeah. Yep. I recommend not doing it at the very end of a project though. That can be a bit disastrous, but so in here I had made a note for update. Oh no, sorry. That was actually in a different class. So then here we have update health. Oops. Update health. So on received damage. And so if we look at this update health function, what it's actually doing is just relaying us into this function. And then, we do this check. Is it null pointer? Then we do a cast. Then we have to go into the player controller, then set HUD health. Oh wait, did I get confused? No, here it is. Yeah, it's just a highlight. Yeah, and then we go into here. Then we're setting stuff on the HUD itself. So it seems like that's probably too many points of having to kind of follow this little chain. If you connect it more with something like on the character or on the component where the health lives, you can kind of bypass this chain of calls and kind of having to chase down where something's happening. But once again, a lot of these things are very, very easy things to fix and to clean up in order to really solidify the project. Overall, with a few changes, I think this would be fantastic. It's it is definitely, besides like magic numbers here and there. I think I actually made a note about this. Is you could use some type of like float curve or a timeline in order to kind of gauge how much should be lost or what color it should be, or vector curve. There's a lot of options, and these are all things built into Unreal already that will make your life easier. I definitely do recommend. Sound like a broken record, is looking at the engine code. It's super easy. You can just follow the chain down to here's a player controller. It's that easy to get to all this and just take a look. Yeah, so that's I still have a bit more things. I'm not sure how we're doing on time.
We still have 6 minutes.
6 whole minutes. All right. So,
but don't feel like you have to fill them all, because I have a bunch of backup topics about what I've noticed already. So either way.
Okay, yeah, I can really quickly kind of. I don't have much left, but a lot of these things like carried ammo map, you could probably just move this to the constructor, initialize this all at once, and you don't have to do it at runtime. If I remember, this is begin play. Yep. So you can move it into the constructor somewhere where it's always being done once. You don't have to pay the cost at runtime or anything like that per se. Yeah, and then in here, more kind of equipped weapon, update carried ammo, and then once again the controller. You just walk up this chain. So, and you'll also see in here there's a lot of copy and pasted kind of code. You could offload things like this to a function. Just check all at once. So yeah, there's a
I also want to comment a bit about null checks. Is that they're usually good, but the thing is, if the thing that you're expecting to never be null is null, how are you handling it? And sometimes you might want to know if something that's never supposed to be null is null. So in that case, you don't want to just do an if null check and then just be done with it. So in some cases, you actually want it to either like catch and ensure or even crash, because it might mean that something is very wrong. But in case that it is totally acceptable that the HUD is just missing, just gone, maybe you have a specific case where that's supposed to happen, great. But if not, it's very dangerous to just check for it and then have the game being in an undefined state.
Absolutely. And I did make a note about that, and I'm glad you brought it up. Ensure, verify, those will be fantastic. Whenever I'm running a program, whenever I'm trying to play a game, I don't use like the project file or anything like that. I always hit debug mode. I'm always running in debug mode in case there's any type of crash or any type of ensure, verify, whatever I'm hitting. I can make sure to see it.
From the Visual Studio configuration?
Yeah, just
oh, so you're running like with okay.
Yep. Yeah,
I would actually I recommend still using the development, because it has pretty much all the same debug tools, but the thing is, it just optimizes the code also. So try to always use development or debug game if you want to debug your code.
Yes, I should clarify. Not the configuration. I still do development editor, but like you can see up here, it just hops in and attaches to the process.
That's the one that should be like good for like 90% of cases, the development editor.
Mm-hmm.
Because what debug does is that it doesn't optimize anything. Everything runs slower. It runs a bunch more checks, and you really sometimes need to use it where either your function gets compiled away and you don't want that, or you want the extra slow ensures to run. Otherwise, development should be good for all your cases.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would disagree. All of our programmers run with debug because
oh my god,
because no, it's not that slow at all. Like, it's totally playable. Because what you just said, compilers optimize stuff, and then you're trying to then go like, well, what's actually happening, and like nothing matches, and it's not fun. Debug's great.
Yeah,
I used to be in that camp as well. That like, no, you can't run in debug, but I was proven wrong.
Yeah, there's an Unreal Pragma for that.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, there's a Unreal Pragma disable optimize.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
UE underscore Pragma, maybe. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there's a Pragma disable optimization specifically for Unreal that works on all platforms. And yeah, that's a really good point. Also, like I love it when people have different opinions, especially per studio. That some people would like use debug, and especially when you have reasons for it. Because there are some studios who are like development is fine. Like I would say development is fine. You say debug is fine, because I do realize it can be a headache trying to debug something, and it's just optimized away, and it doesn't even step into the function at all. Especially with engine code, because a lot of it is inline. We still have 1.5 minutes, by the way.
All right. I guess I can do a quick recap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I really like how things are done. I think there's a few key areas where you could reduce code quite a bit, and that will make things a lot easier to read. As an example right here, if you can reduce this all down to some function, you're cutting down every single one of these by 5 lines of code or whatever it is. And why I'm not big about reducing lines of code necessarily, but in terms of cleanliness and readability, those always come to the forefront. But overall, just those few improvements and kind of showing that you have this basic Unreal knowledge would probably be the biggest things in an interview. You don't have to know everything at all, but the more that you can show me that you know kind of the engine and just good code practice will probably go the furthest. Of course, it's always dependent on what level of programmer you're interviewing and their experience level. But yeah.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christian. And yeah, like this is it for the code review part. Again, I want to emphasize that all the winners are like, they are winners. They got the prizes. You got this expert code review, and it might sound like, it might have just been absolute, mess based on like how much feedback you get. But even like in any company, in a code review, you would get feedback like that. It doesn't mean the code is bad. It just means that I don't know, like everyone has an opinion about it. And knowing how the leads of these different companies that you'll be trying to get a job at, how they think, it helps you get a job and become a better programmer. I think we have 2 minutes left. I just want to, again, congratulate the winners. And for all the judges, thank you so much for helping out. And Oleg, do you want to wrap it up for us?
No, I just want to thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for all the submissions. Thanks for the games. And of course, I want to thank you guys, Ville, Mikko, Ari, and Christian. So thank you very, very much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you all.